Perfects podcast. I am your host, Temenosis, and today I am joined by Jonathan McCormack, an attachment specialist trained in the Ideal Parent Figure Protocol and Internal Family Systems. You can find him over at attachmenthealinghelp.com, and you can also find that link in the bio. Jonathan, hello.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you, brother. Oh, it's good to hear. Good to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm excited to talk to you today. Attachment is something I have always been very drawn to, especially training as a psychotherapist. I think it's largely talked about in pop psychology, but I think not always fully understood. And so I think this could be a really fun conversation to deep dive in, to really understand attachment from, all sorts of lenses.
Yeah.
So I want to just kind of talk to you a little bit and know who you are and what got you into this work.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Yeah. Well, first of all, attachment's huge. And, you could tell it's like a huge booming industry. It's kind of like the word narcissism. All of a sudden, everyone's a narcissist. All of a sudden, everyone's got attachment problems. They're not too clear what that means, but they got them,
Mm-hmm.
And I actually got into this. I started doing drug and alcohol counseling, worked with behavioral disorder children, a lot of really inpatient, rough places, very depressing. And I actually got into this because I went into therapy. I needed help. And I almost feel like that wounded healer archetype. Like, those are my people. You know what I mean? Like, I'd rather have someone, because I don't know how your training was, but I remember, my supervisors would say, you really don't have to have the same experience. After all, a heart surgeon doesn't need to have a heart attack themselves.
Right.
That's true. But this is talking. And when you're talking, you want to know someone at least knows where you've been.
Knows the ballpark at the very least.
Yeah. I mean, you yourself don't have to go through terrible trauma, but you've lived a life where you at least know that neighborhood. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And with attachment, it's very different than, say, many psychodynamic theories, because psychodynamics, sometimes it can be a little more blank-faced, I'm kind of going to mirror you, so on and so forth. Well, someone has attachment problems, it's very relational. And attachment therapists ought to be very relational, very upfront. I mean, if I care about someone, I would actually say it like, hey, I care about you. And, a lot of psychodynamics, like, no, that's crossing some borders, So I was in that kind of psychodynamic there. Not psychodynamic, I wish. I wish that would, but just regular talk therapy. I was in it for years. And I was always afraid to say how this is going to actually get me better. Always terrified, And one day I finally said, listen, I'm not getting any better. I've been here for a couple of years. And she actually goes, yeah, but you know what? You know what your problems are. I was like, yeah, I do know. I've been knowing it for a long time, but it hasn't been changing. That's the problem. So I started looking into experiential modalities, things where a session is an experience. Experiences change us, They're more somatic. They're more emotion-based, bottom-up stuff. Cognitive behavioral therapy is all like kind of top-down and bottom-up stuff. And I started looking at my own relationship problems. And even though I read so much, object relations, this, that, the other thing, I even though attachment's in the pop world, I don't know the pop world. Like, I'm so clueless. But in the literature that I was reading, it really wasn't mentioned that much. Now I know it's a big thing, but it really wasn't. When I got involved, like, they weren't it's mentioned very peripherally. And so I got myself an attachment therapist for me, and it helped me so much. And I thought, like, yeah, this is it. The thing I do is Ideal Parent Figure Protocol. We talk about that later, but it's just a modality that really helped me. And the other thing about attachment theory is, like, when I saw it it really clicked, because when you read psychodynamic theory, I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm saying they're very complicated. And it's
Mm-hmm.
hard unless you're a very intelligent, abstract thinker. Well, I am kind of like that, but a lot of people aren't. But unless you are like that, it's hard for you to place yourself in it. And you don't need to if you have a good therapist. You don't need to. But me, I want to understand. And the
Mm-hmm.
attachment theory was so simple. Comes from a guy named Bowlby, and it was like very easy, and it explained so much. And I started looking at personality disorders
Mm-hmm.
in an attachment way, people's anxiety disorders in an attachment way, OCD even in an attachment. And attachment doesn't solve all these things at all, but it makes sense of them in a way that
Mm-hmm.
kind of was very. I started seeing other people's problems. Like, it's something to do with security and depth. And we kind of know that. I mean, listen, Freud said, what is the cure? The cure is love.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of know that already. That it's something about attachment. But this kind of brought it to it. And when I started looking at the world, I'm always like, so why come everyone's unhappy and sad? A million reasons. But just one, I really do believe, is we're relational beings. We are made to be dependent upon each other. I think, yeah, people dig philosophy. McKintrey says we are dependent rational animals. Yeah. And yet all I hear is about independence. And
Mm-hmm.
our society has been making us more disconnected. I believe Wendell Berry says this should be our metric if we should adopt a technology. Does it make us less dependent on others? And if it does, we ought not adopt it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that ain't gonna happen. I get it. But I appreciate the sentiment. You know what I mean? And when I saw that, I was like, I'm very disconnected. And my friends are. And everyone I'm seeing, and yet they're in therapy. They have good jobs. They got a house. Why can't they have long-term relationships? I just don't understand why there's so much depression. I mean, I get it, but that much? Why come people? Listen, I mean, let's just be honest. 50 years ago, I'm not saying relationships were great. I'm not saying like people were happy, but it was easier. And there's a lot of social reasons for that. Okay, I get that. But it seems like, okay, even with that, why can't we do that? I didn't get it.
Mm-hmm.
Attachment kind of opened that up for me. And it helped my own healing. I just kind of wanted to give back to other people. That was my little journey.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that story. I'm struck by a lot of what you said. I think starting out too, it sounds like in chemical dependency and more of the, like you say, higher acuity mental health care
Yeah.
world. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and how poorly staffed and trained those areas are
Mm.
in mental health care, and how desperately it needs a different model, a different way of looking at the human. And then also really appreciating what you said about the sort of psychoanalytic, almost like mirror. We're just supposed to be
Yeah.
these neutral mirrors that don't really have a mind of our own exactly. Or if we do, it's kind of hidden. We don't share it with the client. That would be a really bad move.
Yeah.
And so we're just kind of this neutral mirror that's taking in the unconscious, and maybe every other session we give an interpretation,
Mm-hmm.
and it likely doesn't fully land, but it increases insight. So you're going to get better if you increase an insight or self understanding,
Right.
not if you change, but like
Right.
the
Right.
idea of changing. So I really appreciate you sharing your journey of going from that, like getting that almost neutral, kind of cold and
Yeah.
distant psychotherapy to a more
Yeah.
relational, attachment based, informed
Yeah.
by how we are formed by relationships.
It's true. Yeah. Well, I mean, you're psychodynamic. Is it still like that, or do I have like an old school Freudian view? Is it still very mere, uh,
Yeah, good
impersonal?
question. Yeah, so personally I think it's changing. I think
Okay.
psychotherapy in mass is moving towards somatic, attachment
Yeah.
based, trauma informed perspectives,
Yeah.
really in the relationship. That's what I see as being the leading edge right now of therapy.
Mm.
There are, though, in a lot of psychoanalytic corners,
Yeah, yeah.
a more neutral stance and less. I would say it's coming from a very highly educated place. You know, reading a lot of books on
Mm,
psychoanalysis, the history of psychoanalysis, Freud, object relations. You know, contemporary schools, and so some of there's like a little bit of pretentiousness I notice. Like, oh, I wouldn't just go. It wouldn't be that simple. You know,
mm.
it needs to be more complex. So I think
Yeah,
there's some pretentiousness in the psychoanalytic crowd, but I get where they're coming from. But at the same time, I think it misses sometimes the simplicity of what people need in certain, like, don't give them reassurance ever. Like,
I,
never give any kind
I,
of reassurance or
I know.
corrective emotional experience because that doesn't exist. You know, there's something like that never happened. They never got the corrective emotional experience, so don't give it to them.
Yeah,
There's something about that that's like kind of cruel.
yeah. I mean, we're humans. I get it, but yeah, I suppose I was talking actually less about psychodynamic and more about psychoanalytic. You know, I used to hang out with a bunch of Lacanians, and
Mm.
holy, like, brother, that was like the worst days of my life because they'd be telling like, yeah, I have a person, he's suicidal, and then they would talk for like 3 hours of this almost incomprehensible. And I love abstract thoughts, so I'd be so into it, but it was like a game. It's almost like a secret language, you know. And
Hmm.
I'm like, is this kind of a this is a like what is this? This kid needs X, Y, and Z, and you're talking about the mirror stage and petit object A and da da da. And as you know, Freud was like wanted everyone to have psychic hygiene. And they noticed the working class were immune to psychoanalysis. And I don't know
Mm.
if you heard that. I'm
Yeah,
Irish.
yeah,
You heard
yeah,
like, oh,
yeah. Uh-huh.
Freud supposedly, I don't think he said this, but supposedly said Irish people are immune to psychoanalysis too.
Uh,
I don't know if he actually said that. I've heard that thrown around. But it's like, well, listen, if you have a modality that is only good for like 10% of
uh-huh.
people, that's not a good modality. You know what I mean? I mean, come on, that's fine.
Hmm.
But what does that tell you if it doesn't work for working class people? You know?
Yeah,
I mean, really, it's
yeah.
like bring it down. And I agree that's all about, I'm big into somatic, you know? And it's like, oh, look, we have bodies.
Mm.
Shocking. Yeah, yeah. People didn't know that before, I guess. But we still think of ourselves as, you know, Descartesian. I think, therefore I am. You know, I'm more like, no,
Hmm.
no. I love, therefore I am. And I'm not a
Mm.
brain on a stick. I'm shaped bodily, bodily all the time. I mean, come on.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Mm.
It's kind of, and believe it or not, I talked to Donald Kalsha, the very famous Jungian guy,
Hmm.
and even
Yeah.
he was like, yeah, Jungians completely forgot about the body, and we're going to start bringing in somaticism. And that's pretty exciting. I'm not too
Yeah.
much into Jungian, but I just dig to see how these modalities will deal with the body. It's so interesting.
So interesting. I think, yeah, that we have really ignored the body in therapy, and I don't exactly know why. Maybe it's this like really ancient idea of like the spirit being disembodied, and so
Yeah.
maybe we shouldn't worry what how we feel in the body. It should be independent of the body. What exactly are we working on then? It's interesting. So I
Yeah.
certainly resonate with that.
Well, it's so funny. Somaticism, they kind of have a little schema, and they're kind of like, well, here's the deal. You got a basic belief system or something. That's all unconscious, right? But before you have a thought, you have an emotion. And before you have an emotion, you have a sensation. And you feel a sensation in the body. And then you have an emotion. And then you have the thought. And the mind is based this off of a schema. So there's the first schematic thing. And that's how they think of it. I don't know if that's true or not. I have no idea. But oftentimes that's how they think of it to do these modalities. I have to say, I was in therapy. No one ever asked me like, where do you feel that in the body when you're around this person? You know, are your hands clenching up? No one
Mm-hmm.
would even point out to me. They would just say, you know, what are you feeling? I
Mm-hmm.
didn't like I was like a you know like I'm a disembodied mammal. You know, like bro, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not Casper the Ghost here. I'm in my like I am my meat suit. Like I'm
Mm.
you know, let's not split body and mind apart. You know, because we're all
Mm-hmm.
whole beings, and and that stuff's just beginning. And again, what's sad is a lot of somatic blah blah blah, very expensive and hard to find. And I really don't like. And another, I don't know how your thing was, but when I went to school, we learned very basic stuff, and I had to learn everything paying for it. Yeah, and I still do it. Like, you know, like I got, I
Mm-hmm.
had to pay to learn ideal
Right.
parent figure. I had to pay for some. I had to pay,
Right.
and as you know, it's thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And guess what? Most therapists are not going to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to learn these modalities. IFS, I took level one. You know how expensive it was? It's,
Mm.
like, brother, you're rich. You're rich as hell if you can, or you're like me and you don't have a family and you're very
Mm.
comfortable living small. But that's a privilege. Most people are not privileged. I mean, I just think that's awful that you don't learn these things in university. You do learn
Agreed. Yeah.
CBT. There's a couple great. Yeah, like, how was it for
Y-
you
y-
though?
Yeah. Very similar in the sense that, and I think some programs are different, so I don't want to say that my program represents it, but I, my sense is the only reason I felt comfortable jumping into doing my first therapy session is because of my clinical experience working in a psych hospital
Mm.
and community mental health before going to grad school
Oh.
and having learned there and done my own work. So that was probably the biggest thing, is doing my own
Mm.
work and working with others. And the training I got in school felt just kind of like a very basic review of
Yeah.
CBT, DBT, motivational interviewing. So,
Ah,
how do you
yes.
ask questions and how do you listen? Really basic people skills that I think, in my personal opinion, like it would not have trained me to work with a person,
Yeah,
to
I
work and
agree.
do
And
therapeutic work,
yeah.
deep, real therapeutic work. I mean, I could go listen to somebody.
Hmm.
Um, and there's therapeutic value to that, but to actually do work where something is transformed in a way that positively benefits somebody's life, I don't think I could have done that work with the training
Uh,
I got.
I totally agree. And by the way, I don't mean to downplay psychodynamic therapy. Just so you know, my therapist I see now is psychodynamic, so
Mm,
uh, I'm not downplaying it. And some schools are great for psychodynamic. I know that too. But
mm,
Gabor Mate, he rails against America, at least, that
mm,
we're churning out therapists that know nothing, and I have to agree. I didn't. I learned certain things, but not much. The
yeah,
supervision, very, and so what did I do? I pay people, but that's
right.
because I got the money. Most people don't got money, and most people aren't going to pay for it. Why would you pay $150 a week? Da-da-da. Yeah, I can do it. Most people can't. They're scraping by, man. It's just
Hmm.
so awful. And then people, tell me, oh, I was in therapy for years and didn't work. Of course, you're not being prepared, and people are
Mm,
suffering from it.
hmm. And I think that, yeah, there's something to you as a therapist. You can only do, in my opinion, the work if you in some way understand the map and the territory.
Mm,
At the very least, the territory. You don't always need to know some kind of conceptual map, but if you've been through it yourself,
yeah.
then you can do it. Because then your own fears, when you come up against someone feeling horrible shame that they're going to be alone forever,
Mm,
and you don't understand what that actually feels like,
yeah.
and that it's actually safe to feel that feeling,
Yeah.
then you can't guide someone there. And you and a
Yeah. I
lot of
mean,
people
think.
just
Yeah.
don't, and so they don't go there.
Well, I mean, think of the response if someone goes, "I feel terribly alone," and the person goes, "Yeah, but you have a good job."
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, wow. What planet are you from? And I will say that I also think is, so I learned I do some IFS. Well, what did I do? I got an IFS therapist myself for quite a while. I teach it, so I got that because I wanted to, well, frankly, I needed it. That's why I
Mm,
did it. But also just to see what it's like to be on the other side. Like you said, you had this experience, da da da.
Hmm.
and that was so helpful. I'm always a little sketched out by therapists that don't have their own therapist or never went through therapy.
Hmm.
I'm like, really? Boy, because life's
Yeah.
very messed up now. How did you do that? And some people don't need it, so God bless them. I know some that never have been, and they're wonderful. But boy, a lot of them, I don't know. I think that's kind of an important thing that you're self-working. At least you have
Hmm.
something you're doing.
Yeah, I think it's what makes or breaks therapists. In my experience, is the level to which you're willing to go to the scary, darker
Mm,
places within yourself
yeah.
will determine how you can show up to others there. And so if you are the kind of therapist that doesn't do that, you just hand out worksheets,
All
or
right.
yeah, you're kind of in the back, like you're not really, maybe you're just giving advice, like, hey,
Uh,
yeah, you might feel alone right now, but if you put yourself out there, let me think of, I'll find a worksheet for you that can improve your communication skills,
right.
and
Right.
you'll get what you want then,
Yeah.
and completely missing this open wound that is just
Yes.
bleeding out.
Well, I tell you,
Let's
man,
put a
I was
band-aid
once,
on that. Yeah.
yeah, funny. When I was like 19, terrible, terrible, very depressed. I went to see a DBT, and she actually gave me a worksheet, and she goes, "This will help you." And I looked at it,
Mm.
and it was like 20 things to do to feel better,
Uh-huh.
and it was literally like, and this is literally, I'm not joking. It was go to a Hallmark card store and pick out funny cards. Uh,
Mm.
list cut construction paper and da 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 da. Now DBT is a lot better than that, so
Uh,
not. But it was just like, here I am. I'm so alone. I'm going through. When I was young,
yeah.
da, da, da.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
someone handed me a worksheet, and I
Oh,
was like,
it's so dehumanizing.
isn't it? I know it's unbelievable. Uh, and
Yeah.
I've heard, I have friends who, like, I'm like, oh, what modality are you going through? And they're like, oh, we're doing a schema therapy. She's never done it. We're going through the book together. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't sound like a good idea. Like she's learning it on the fly as you go
Yeah.
together. I don't. Okay.
It's so interesting. I saw that when I worked in a psych hospital, was people were at their lowest in their entire life. This is the most difficult place they've ever been, and gnarly places and
Yeah.
emotional experiences that most of the population, I don't think, can fathom.
Hmm.
And certainly not these were usually occupational therapists giving coloring sheets, so they can color in. And for some people that's grounding, but again, it's so dehumanizing, and it so misses.
Yeah.
Like, there's something about it that's so tone deaf.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I could talk about this for hours, but I do want to pick your brain a little bit on
Sure. Sure. Sure.
attachment.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So,
Yeah.
so I'm just going to ask this really broad question.
Sure.
What is attachment?
Yeah. Well, attachment is essentially the ability to bond. Right? It's just the ability to bond. If when you're born, you're a little baby, you have to have the ability to feel safe around that parent and to want to be around them. And what does that actually look like? Okay, there's about 5 things. If you grow up in a family, the first 2 years, a lot of attachment patterns are put down. No, not like Bowlby thought in a very deterministic way. We now know they can change. But I have to say, they're pretty, put it this way, probably around 80% of people die with the same attachment patterns they had when they were born.
Mm,
They don't change a whole lot unless you do it intentionally, you know?
mm,
Things can happen, but they're pretty set down. But so if you grow up, you naturally have a sense of safety. Why? Your parent was very reliable and consistent. Oh, and you get this thing like, no, this mom and dad, reliable, consistent. That's what makes us feel safe, even in a relationship. These 5 things are, by the way, what makes a good relationship. Uh, Being attuned. What does that mean? Well, The parent kind of knows what you're going through and they kind of feel into you and they know when you're hungry and they kind of tell when you're, and you feel someone else is there. 3, they can soothe you. They can soothe you. By the way, if you're going to have a relationship, first thing, I don't care anything else, do you feel soothed? Do you feel regulated when you're around them? That feeling you got with grandpa, your mom, or your dad. Do you get that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're regulating them and they're regulating you. And if you can't do that, that rarely changes. You know, the other thing is delight. Were you around parents who delighted in you? I got to tell you, a lot of us are great in delighting in our partners, but we have trouble being delighted in. When's the last time you just gave yourself open and just, I'm just going to let myself be delighted in? But that's what the child should experience. And 5th is support. And support's about exploration, Perhaps you've seen little children on the playground and they go out and play. Then what happens? They get dysregulated. What do? They come back to mom and they just touch her. Regulation. And then they go out and explore the world. Same thing with our partners. Of course, we don't want codependency. We want each person to be dependent and independent. But when we come home from work and we're dysregulated, that person, they regulate us. And we just feel safe around them. And what does that look like? Well, basically, you're okay with being alone, but you're also okay with someone getting close to you. Those 5 things will be there, whether you're alone or whether someone gets close. Attachment problems, someone gets close and you cannot be delighted in. Someone gets close and you are dysregulated. Someone gets close, you don't feel safe. Whatever. Those are the 5 things that make a healthy attachment. That's all. And just briefly, there's basically 2, anxious attachment and avoidant attachment. Sometimes people have both. Anxious attachment, well, that means probably that parent may have been inconsistent. And I'll just say this, not because they're bad parents. That's not true. I've had clients with the most wonderful parents in the world, but they weren't around. They had to work. They were wonderful, but they weren't around. And the kid doesn't know that. The kid doesn't know mom and dad's working for me. The kid just knows that mom's not there. It's not the parents' fault. Wonderful parents. But if you're anxious, what happens if someone's not consistent? Well, you reach out. You're hyper vigilant. You're hyper attached. You reach out to claw and hold on to them. You're needy. Avoidant? Well, I bet you if you're avoidant, you tried to reach out a million times and no one was there for you. You cried, no one came. You're really hungry, no one came. You wanted to tell your mom and dad something, they didn't care. They weren't around. So you just shut down all attachment systems completely. I don't even have a need for love. These people are very avoidant. Sometimes people have both. If they have one parent one way, another parent the other way, then they have both depending. Sometimes they're very needy, sometimes they're very avoidant. And I gotta tell you, I know it's a very simple little schematic there, but a lot of people kind of fit into there, and you can kind of see relational dynamics just by that, that alone. And so we say, whatever happens the first 18 months makes an internal working model. It just means this is what I'm going to expect. This is what I'm going to be expected to do. This is what I think relationships look like. And I don't care if you learn new information later, it's in your body already. That's your pattern. That's your pattern. And that's how you will navigate the world. And I personally believe, before World War II, for the Industrial Revolution, you grew up. You had several grandpas and uncles, and then maybe dad's an alcoholic, but you got 2 uncles and 2 aunts, and you might suffer and be starving and have but attachment? No, there was no attachment issues. Come on. You had a million people. You felt safe. Primal peoples, indigenous peoples. The first 2 years of life, that baby barely touched the ground, always in skin contact with mom. There's some wisdom there. What does it look like today? Well, today you got 2 parents, not like 50, not, okay. And they might, at least one's going to be gone most of the time. At least one, probably both. Maybe you're in daycare. Oh, Lord. I get it. You got to do what you got to do. But actually, I believe our current Surgeon General even made a big deal about the damage done by daycare. And I hate saying this because it makes mothers feel guilty, but it does do quite a bit of damage. If that child knows you're there and has you as a secure, that's great though, and don't freak out too much. But I do have to say it does do damage.
Mm.
We're all doing our best. The whole world's messed up. You're not going to be ideal. Don't feel bad, moms. Really, that's not going to help anyway. And they have you, and that's wonderful.
Mm.
But still, we've created a society towards isolation. And everyone's wondering why come Generation Z is so messed up and they're so fragile and they're just little snowflakes. Well, I kind of agree. I get that. And I'm very, yeah, toughen up. And I think
Mm.
it's a lot performative. And I get that. That's true. I'll give you that. But also look at this. They live in a postmodern world where everything's topsy-turvy. Who knows what's going to happen in 20 years? And they don't have the things you took that you don't even know made you a
Mm-hmm.
secure human being. You just took it for granted. People
Mm.
older. These kids didn't have that. You know, they didn't have that steady attachment. They didn't have that safety, and they're not going to feel safe in the world. So, and believe me, everyone would be the same way if they grew up like that. So it's kind of like, boy, unprecedented since the World War II. Everything broke apart. That's when it began. And boy, I think the Gen Z is really the this is the finally we're seeing the
Mm.
results. As far as
Mm-hmm.
COVID, that hurt because people are very isolated. That didn't help. But society is isolating. Period. I don't know my neighbors. They don't know me. I wouldn't go to them for help. You know. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, well, of course you feel very insecure. Of course you have anxiety disorders. Come on. Who wouldn't?
Yeah, I like what you're saying about the more systemic view, of how attachment just as a sort of en masse, how it's actually affecting everybody.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
lack of connection, lack of intimacy, even just with our parents. Maybe they're
Yeah.
yeah. So one thing I'm thinking about as you're talking, so I want to talk about the ideal parent figure, but I also am just thinking generally if someone's listening to this and they're thinking, I wonder if I'm have some kind of attachment disorder
Mhm.
or if there's been some wounding in attachment. Um, but how would I know?
Yeah. Well, you could, there's a big test, AAI, the adult attachment theory. That's a fortune, which again is a shame. There are tests online that you can find, you know, but I would just, yeah, I would just ask, like, can you feel completely safe in a relationship? Can you feel very comfortable? And can it say, I can share anything and I can make my requests known? Hey. And when they tell me, like, hey, you were late today, and the person says, yeah, I was really busy at work. When they tell you that, you believe them. You trust
Mm,
them. You can trust that. And instead of like, oh, yeah, is this a lie? Da, 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 da. No, no. If you've been with someone, you know, can you feel that way? Can you make your request? Or you're like, when he does this, it upsets me. And when she says this, but I just don't want to say anything. Oh, I mean, is that so
mm-hmm,
extreme? It's, can you communicate? I wouldn't feel safe that way if I could speak freely around my partner. I
mm,
wouldn't feel safe and relaxed. I wouldn't feel like how I used to feel with my grandpa. That's
mm,
the feeling. Can you get the feeling that you had with that loved one when you're with them? You know. The other thing is, just kind of, it's kind of curious when you guys do have fights. When you make up, are you closer? And if you're
mm,
closer, your attachment's okay. Not too bad, probably. Yeah, it's a good rule. Or do you sweep it under the tongue? We're just not going to talk about it. Or is it kind of still resentments? There's some, you're not
mm,
attaching to that person. There's a fear there, to be honest. Those are kind of like quick little, you know,
mm,
check those
mm-hmm,
out, see how you're doing. Another thing is like this, like imagine you're in the room, you're all alone, or your car broke down. Quick. First person you think to call out to. That's your attachment figure. And if it's not your partner, Well, you got to think about that. Who is that? Is that your shrink? Is that your mom? It should be your partner if you're in a relationship, because that's your
Mm-hmm.
main base of security. Who do you first think of to reach out to? Just boom, what pops into your head?
Mm-hmm.
It's a good little thought experiment,
Mm.
you know?
Yeah. So I'm just thinking this person listening in is saying, looking back, and he's like, well, I don't actually trust my partner or feel safe with them. Come to think of it, I don't trust or feel safe with anybody.
Yeah,
And realizing, oh, I guess I am. I'm a bit insecurely attached.
yeah, yeah.
What do I do about it? Can I do anything about it?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's very modalities had to be built for this, you know. And I can tell you a good one. It's not built for this, but I think it works. IFS. This is parts therapy called internal family systems, and this is kind of like we're made of parts. These aren't individual personalities. No, no multiple, but no. But just part of you feels this way, part of you feels that way. And it's almost like wounded little children. And IFS, you talk to that child, you witness them, give an emotional correction. That child felt afraid, that inner child, so you give them some love, and maybe you
Mm,
unburden them. Maybe you do a little cognitive reframe. Why were you so upset at 8 when mom yelled at you? Because you
mm,
thought you were bad? Let's bring an adult perspective. You were not bad. Mom had issues, was stressed out, whatever. IFS is great. I do that. But the main one, kind of like the gold standard right now, is Ideal Parent Figure Protocol, you know? And that was made by Dan Brown and David Elliott. Dan Brown died last year. David Elliott's still going strong. He's revamping a little bit. He has integral attachment theory, he's calling it.
mm,
But the ideal parent figure protocol is basically this. It's like, listen, you know, uh, you have this eternal working model, right? It's going off your memories. You know what you can do? You could just imagine different memories. Imagine a really loving parent. Imagine a parent giving you that delight, giving you that this, that, the other thing. Why does that work? Well, as you know, the unconscious doesn't distinguish between memory and fantasy. And it really doesn't before the age of 10 because
mm,
there's no hard border. Little kids, they're half fantasy land, half memory, you know? And you can practice this. Now, you need a facilitator or a therapist to do it because healing only happens in relationship.
mm,
That's the only way it happens. A lot of theories why. I don't know. Some special about two hearts opening to each other. And so, the modality kind of looks like this. Like, okay, you close your eyes. It's kind of like a guided thing. Now notice the ideal parents are doing X, Y, and Z. Imagine yourself as a little kid. What's happening? You say, oh, I'm feeling loved. I'm feeling that.
mm-hmm,
Oh, where do you feel in the body? Got to be somatic. Oh, right in my heart. Ah, and this and that. And you really ground these experiences in it bodily. And since you're working, if you're working with me or a therapist, it's collaborative.
mm-hmm,
Someone's there. So that means all your relational neurons are lit up because someone's in the room with you. Someone's there and you're talking to them. You're really attuned because I have my eyes closed. You have your eyes closed. I don't know what you're going through. You are going to have to know what you're going through and then be able to express it to me. And I'm going to be able to follow it. And we have to attune to each other. And I'm going to have to be clued in to feel like, oh, that's happening. I got it. Oh, and what's that like? Oh, and then
mm,
imagine this. And if I go the wrong way, then you have to be able to tell me, no, you're talking too much. You're this. And I have to be very comfortable. Say, oh, thank you.
mm-hmm.
All these things are happening with the ideal parent figure protocol. Very simple, but a million things are happening. And if you do that, for long enough, your mind starts saying, what can I expect when someone is angry at me? And instead of going back to when you were 7 and getting punished, your mind automatically goes back to all those other memories, those fantasies, if you wish, in your imagination. And it goes based on that. And it uses that. That's the
Mm.
very basic thing. You're making a new internal working model. You know? Yeah.
Yeah, and doing it in relationship with another human being
Well, that's the thing.
being
Avoidance
one of
hear
them.
this and they go, I'm going to go and listen to meditations on my own. My personal view is I believe they are helpful. Some people say no, maybe I'm wrong. I believe they're helpful, but they're about 10%. And you can do it that way. And again, I think they are helpful. But unless you're attuning, collaborating, the three pillar method, only one from Dan Brown, it's called the three pillar method. Only one is the ideal parent figure protocol. The other important piece, well, collaboration. You have to collaborate. That's what relationships are about. And what's the third one? Mentalization. Mentalization, briefly, it's not knowing what's happening inside you. It's actually thinking about your thinking, So I might say like, yeah, how you and your girlfriend, me and my girlfriend get along great. And we were just the other day, we were having such a good time. We started arguing, which we always do. But then later we did X, Y, and Z. Well, hold on. If you're mentalizing, you're monitoring your thoughts. You just said you're getting along great, and then you just told me you were fighting. That's poor mentalization. Didn't you notice you just did that? And the weird thing about attachment theories, believe it or not, you can tell someone's attachment by their sentence structure. It's crazy, but so I'll have someone and they'll be talking very coherently, very cohesively, very intelligently, and I was like, oh, what happened with your mom? And if you're avoidant, they'll be like, oh, she hit me. And she hit me, what? If you're anxious, I'm like, what's your mom? Well, mom, and you'll tell me like an 8-hour long story that like involves like 16 characters, and I can't follow it, and your mind just goes into a million pieces. Meanwhile, I just talked to you, and you're so coherent, and you're so, what happened? Well, what happened is you became dysregulated, and you have not made sense of that. When you were 8, you didn't know why that happened. So you weren't able to turn that into a narrative that made sense to you. Big thing about trauma we learned. What's trauma? When you get sexually abused or beaten? No, that's not. Because a lot of people have that happen to them, and they don't have any disorders. How does that happen? Those people had a lot of support, and they're able to verbalize it and talk it over again and again and again, maybe with their mom, maybe with their dad, and they kept talking, day after day, week after week, month after month, until they were able to make sense of it and to turn that into a story of how that affected them and what that means to them. So it's not what happens to you, as Gabor Mate says. It's how you react to what happens to you. So the mentalization has a lot to do with being a narrative. And you'll tell people like, oh, why did your father do that to you? I don't know. Well, he must have thought about it. That's pretty weird behavior. Yeah, I never really thought about it. If you're avoidant, if you're anxious, you'll just come up, I have no idea. You come up with a million stories. No. 3-pillar model: mentalization, collaboration, ideal parent figure protocol. You need all three. Yeah.
And so who is the facilitator? What role do they take? Are they more so just a collaborator on the outside, a friendly witness? Or do they become the ideal parent at any moment?
Well, the therapist ought to model an ideal parent. That means, you see someone. I can tell you, I only work with people I love. I work with people, and after 3 months, if I don't really like this person, I'm not going to be good. And I say, hey, let's part ways. That's me. Other people are different. And I have that privilege. I have my own private practice, so I can do that. So you ought to model how an ideal parent would be, right? But the truth is, Dan Brown came up with this because he said most therapists are awful. They're not good security figures. They're just not. They're not trained to be. And they're just not. They have their own issues, You know how it is. Sometimes someone's talking, like, boy, I remember one time I got robbed and my car got hijacked in the Bronx, and I had a patient right after. Gee, do you think I was really present for that patient? No, I was like shaking up. I was this, I was that. I was not a good parent, a good secure figure for him. And therapists mostly won't be. And if you notice, the really great therapists are like that. They're just very lively and very this. And then they teach other people their modality, and it doesn't work. Because what was really working was them. It was really them. And I've seen that a million times. So Dan Brown says, you know what? Let's have them them have an internal security figure that's not the therapist. So you're really not the secure person. That person should not be relying on you, the therapist. You turn them back to the ideal figure, and that'll happen in the meditation. Oh, notice. Oh, I'm noticing this, and I really don't know why that is. Because and what do you think? And I'll say, and the ideal parent notices you're having those thoughts, and notice what he does. Notice what he says. Don't rely on me. You're relying on inner parents. Don't rely on me. So it's
Yeah, I
much more
see. I see.
collaborative. It's
Yeah,
much more, you know.
there's a way in which both of you are almost co-creating this
Yes.
ideal parent in the room. It's like
Yes.
it's a third person in a way,
Right.
rather than it being
Because,
you. Yeah.
yeah. Because you know people, they get to, I mean, you know, they get so dependent on the therapist. I've done it where I'm just, oh, and, and, uh, and people get dependent. They end up years being with them and da da
Mm-hmm.
da. And that you have to go in the world yourself. You can't really be you have to have something internal. And I think Dan Brown's right that we're just therapists are just people. Even the best of us are off. We forget. What did you say? Oh, I forgot. And if you're sensitive and you have attachment problems, that's going to really bother you.
Mm.
But if it's mostly on the ideal parent, that's who should be the attachment figure. So yes, the therapist mentioned, you know, he tries to be an ideal figure. He does, but it's much more about no. This is about you and what you want, and you find that resource inside of you. You know, using the ideal parent as a kind of cipher for that inner strength. You know, because it's just the imagination. But yeah.
Yeah, and I really like what you're saying about. It sounds like this is something Dan Brown may have said. Is the ways in which therapists, after they've done their own sort of inner work, and to some degree are just walking around with their own sort of
Mhm.
security in their own existence, their own view and self worth,
Yeah.
and just that presence alone
Mm.
can be regulating for people, and maybe even transformative for others. And then they create a system saying, well, this is kind of what I do, but it's
Hmm.
more about what they're being rather
Yeah.
than what they're doing. The
Yeah.
doing is kind of just an outpouring of their being.
Yeah.
And then people try to do that, and it doesn't always work. It doesn't actually always do the exact thing. And so what I'm hearing Dan Brown doing is almost sidestepping that whole process and saying, well, we actually want to let the clients themselves be that for themselves.
Mm.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Oh, absolutely. And you're right. I mean, for instance, Mark Schwartz over at Harmony Palace, great guy. Check out his videos. He's friends with everyone. So he had a client and he was trying to do IFS and he just wasn't getting anywhere. So Richard Schwartz, the guy who invented this, comes in and Richard Schwartz sits down and boom,
Mm.
instantly it works.
Mm-hmm.
And Mark's sort of like, what? How did that happen? And it's because Richard Schwartz's presence. You know, he just had that.
Yes.
Now his modality also works, I have to say. So,
Mm-hmm.
but it just shows you how important presence is. And we know we don't all always have that presence. We have things going on in our life. Even if you've done work, your relationship, you're getting divorced, you're having bills, and that will alter your presence. And
Mm-hmm.
presence is so important. Like you said, just your presence will be healing. But also realize a lot of times a therapist can't bring that presence in, you know, because he's
Yeah.
distracted. We're all human.
Yeah.
So to counteract that, that presence ought to be found inside, and we keep directing the client back to themselves. Just so.
I have a interesting question here about the ideal parent. So we're it's almost like we're co-creating this ideal parent, but it's almost in place of a parent that was insufficient or a parent that was not able to meet our needs and our vulnerabilities in a way that was nurturing, that was accurate, realistic, or maybe they met them too intrusively and they were
Mm,
actually, there's something about it that was invasive or abusive.
yeah.
And so I'm wondering, what can happen around that. In my experience is there can be a lot of idealization of the parent. Is there either all good or they're all bad.
Mm.
And so that's almost like that splitting can be a really protective move for a little kid who just can't, like you were saying, can't make sense. It's too confusing. Like it's too complicated. It's also too dangerous to
Mm.
have mom be good sometimes and sometimes not good,
Yeah.
sometimes bad. Actually,
Yeah.
sometimes hurts me.
Oh yeah.
And so that kind of, we just need to split it. So we need to have, no, there is a mom who is all good and infallible, and there is a mom who is all bad. And also there's a me who's all good, and there's also a me who's all bad. And I'm wondering if in when you're exploring this and kind of doing this, it's almost like correction, imaginal correction of the parent. If you notice those reactions, if you notice reactions of I have hatred, I really don't like this. I don't
Oh,
want you here with me. I want you to
oh
go.
yeah. Absolutely. And what you're talking about happens, and particularly with avoidant attachment, they always idealize. So I'll say, like, give me an example of a loving thing your mother did. She used to feed me. She was very loving. Food
Mm,
every day.
mm,
Really? That's ever hug
mm,
you? No, no. But the food, very loving.
mm,
Really?
mm,
And what your dad said, hit you with a belt? Oh, yeah, yeah. But, he was tired and cranky. Don't blame him,
yeah.
you know? It's idealing. It's like, bro, that's not a good father figure. I don't know what to tell you. And so you see that all
Mm,
the time in avoidant. And indeed, a lot of times you go into the parent figure and all of a sudden, and they're embarrassed to say it. I'm like, oh, you're with the ideal mother or father. What are you feeling? And they'll say, well, I feel like I'd like to kill them, you know? And I feel like, why the hell are they looking at me? And I feel like da 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 da.
yes.
And a lot of times with abuse, the ideal parents will automatically attack the child. That happens a lot with my more trauma. I mean, I know that's going to happen, you know. So this, so, in the first case, like your hate. Well, I know what an ideal parent would react to. They probably don't, because they don't know. So what would I say? I have to know what an ideal parent. What an ideal parent if a 6-year-old came up and said, "I hate you. I want you to die." Well, an
Mm-hmm.
ideal parent would say something like, "That's okay. You can feel however you want. I still love. There's space here, and you can tell me you hate me, and I love even that part of you, even the part that. And
Mm-hmm.
guess what? You don't have to love me. You don't have, and I don't expect you to. If it was the ideal parent, you'd say something like, "You're just getting to know me. Of course you're not going to love me. You don't know if you can trust me, and I would never ask you to trust me because you're smart enough. You'll see. You'll see how I act, and you'll make up your own mind. Don't go by me." So I have to model that. Now, they would have no idea. And by the way, when we say that, kind of like, all of a sudden they're like, "What? That's not supposed
Mm-hmm.
to happen." They're
Mm-hmm.
confused. You're supposed to reject me. And I'm like, no,
Mm-hmm.
no. Do you want the ideal parent to go away? He'll just go away if you want to be alone. Whatever you want. And
Mm-hmm.
you absolutely, um, and if an ideal parent attacks, you might say, that's not the real ideal parent, obviously. So fade away. And a lot of times they need other imaginary devices. Put yourself in a bubble, magic bubble, and nothing can attack you. You got to do things like that.
I see.
Uh,
Yeah.
but the most interesting thing Dan Brown ever said was attachment problems are a failure of the imagination.
Hmm.
I thought that was so. I'm still unpacking that, I have to admit. But I have seen that a lot of us, even without attachment problems, can't even imagine what a loving relationship would be. A truly loving, like we can't even imagine it. What would that even look like? What would it look like if I just opened my heart and just told my girl, I'm so insecure. I'm secure. I'm gaining weight. I worry about the money. I
Mm.
worry about what I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a lot to do with the imagination. And that truly is like so the therapist is
Yeah.
lending their imagination, to them
I,
at certain parts, kind of like that.
yeah. I can't even imagine that connection is
Yeah,
possible. That
yeah,
vulnerability and connection is possible.
yeah. And I can say if anyone's hearing this and tried and it doesn't work, I have to say a lot of times I don't start with that. Okay, forget ideal parent. How about your adult best self? No. How about a stuffed animal? Have a big
Mm-hmm.
teddy bear, a cartoon character, Star Wars, a dolphin, I've had clients imagine the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man as their ideal father. Okay, that's okay. Well, he's big. I guess I would feel safe and
Yeah, yeah. I
feed
see
me.
the
Okay.
benefit. I see the benefit in the imagination. It's kind of this. It's almost this as if
Yeah,
world. But
yeah,
what's different about it than just doing it in some meditation alone is that there's somebody there with you
mm,
that's sort of co-reifying this as ifness
yes,
and being able to do it in a way that is responsive to your needs and to your vulnerabilities that you never got.
yes, exactly. You know, and then you start expecting these things because a lot. I tell you
Mm,
what. Yeah, I used to do date coaching for people with attachment problems because there's specific ways you can date intentionally. And I saw this, people be secure. I'll just say this, man. No one wants to talk about it, but you gotta be secure inside. But guess what? If you have no job, no girl, no friends, then you're gonna be very insecure. So there has to be social things. Number three, you have to know how to talk to people. I didn't know. I was one of those guys that had to read books. Like, how do I
mm,
make a request? How do I put down a boundary? I didn't know. I don't care how secure you are, And, and,
mm-hmm.
and so I used to kind of coach some people on that. And they would ask me, like, well, can I expect them to text me if they're going to be late? Can I expect them? And it was like,
Mm-hmm.
well, yeah, of course you can. But in their mind, no. If they ask, it's going to be too much, too needy. It's all about our expectations. Like, well, what would happen if they did? Imagine that they did respond to you in the perfect way. And a lot of times they can't even do that. And they're like, I don't even know. Something so small, I mean, the emotional
Oh,
deprivation we live with as human beings, I think is, the loneliness today. The loneliness today is just emotionally and spiritually eviscerating. I mean, it's so
oh,
sad.
oh. I think I want to actually circle back a little bit to what you were just saying there about, with attachment wounding, a lot of the wounding is around what can I expect?
Mm,
What can I expect from others, from the world,
yeah,
from myself?
mm,
And I wonder, you kind of talked to that, but I wonder if you could even talk to somebody who's hearing this and think like, well, I actually don't know what I can expect.
yeah.
I
Well,
need other people to tell me.
yeah. Well, this is something Freud noticed. He knows something about successful people. They all had a super loving relationship with their mom. And it
Mm-hmm.
was almost like they walked into the world expecting the world to be like their mom. And the world was just going to open up and create a space for them. And they just assumed that would happen. And most of the time it did because they just assumed it. And then he knows people who are very unsuccessful, even though they're so smart and they had all these technical skills. And he checking it and they'd have a terrible relation. It could be with the other parent, but the mother's oftentimes primal, especially in that Viennese society. And they walked into a room expecting rejection automatically, expecting her, you know. And I used to, when I was very young, play poker for a living, right? I only did it for 2 years, but it was a fun thing. So what I do, I'd watch how someone walks into the room. And I'm telling you, there's a guy who walks in the room expecting everyone's going to like me here. And there's another type of guy who walks into the room expecting someone might hurt me. And you can tell in their very body language. I professional poker player, I hired an FBI guy to teach me body language. I mean, I was,
Mm,
that's even in our bones. That's in our
mm-hmm.
body. Can you believe how deep that is?
Mm,
So that's the thing. So, this manages your expectations because they don't know what they're worth. Why wouldn't you know if you can ask that? Why? Because you don't know if you're worthy of love, you know?
mm,
And here's the big secret no one else will ever make you secure, period. They can help you, but security has to come within, you know?
mm,
They can help you. You can be on that journey, but the security does have to start with you. You think this is going to make you secure. You expect that. Ideally, when you're acting out of any compulsion to be made worthy, to feel worthy, to make them like you, that's not love. Love is freely given. Again, we're humans. We're humans. We're all gonna come on. I get it. But ideally, love is always free, never compelled by anxiety, inner emptiness, inner self-hatred. That's real love. And that means I don't need this person. I would like them. It's very valuable to me, but of course I don't need them. Relationships are valuable. I don't need them. That's what you want to
Mm-hmm.
be able to say, because the security is actually already in me, you know? And I would
Mm-hmm.
say the security you feel with the other person is actually you getting in contact with what's ever inside you. That they're not making you feel secure. You're actually experiencing your own inner security, and you're mistaking these circumstances for it.
Mm.
I don't know if I'm right about that, but I like to think of it that way.
It's yeah, beautiful what you're saying, and just thinking of a hypothetical, an as if person right now listening to the podcast and thinking, well, I don't find security in myself. I need other people to tell me in some way or some shape or form that I'm okay
Mm,
for me to really be okay. And I try to just like maybe I'm trying to pull off a pragmatic approach. Thinking of like William James of like assume it will be good, and see what happens. Just like live a life as if things will things will work out, and then see what happens. And let's say I'm trying that, but I'm always flooded by these horrible fears and doubts that
yeah,
I'm gonna like lead myself on to just be even more disappointed than before. So it's actually better to stay hidden,
yeah,
to stay
and
not expecting anything. If I expect something, then I'm just going to be setting myself up for disaster and failure and ruin.
oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, and I have clients who start to feel good, and immediately comes the dread. Shut that down. You do not want to feel good, because it's going to crush you when
Mm-hmm.
inevitably fails, because it's going to, and da da da. And I know that thought process where you want to think, uh, but it's very somatic. Like, yeah, rationally, I can say X, Y, and Z, but probably as you know, the story you tell yourself will follow the state of your nervous
Mm-hmm.
system. Story follows state, so you can know X, Y, and Z, but it won't feel true. It will only feel true if the body feels secure. You can know
Mm-hmm.
this person loves you, and I'm certain, and I'm convinced. Okay, does that feel true? No, I have anxiety in my body. Okay, that's why it has to be bottom up.
Yeah.
uh,
Oh yeah.
your body has to expect good things. Your body has to naturally, and you'll see people very relaxed, very secure. And the opposite, the guys who are pretending, you see them very tensed up, and
Yeah.
they're straining. Oh, if I just think more positively, if I just expect good things, your body isn't expecting it. I don't care what your brain says. Believe me. I mean, as you know, the unconscious is like an elephant, and your little ego is like a bird on it trying to steer. Go a positive way. Good luck. The
Mm-hmm.
elephant's going to go wherever the heck the elephant wants to go. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I like what you're saying there about if you're trying to hack it, if you're
Yeah.
trying to strategize
Yeah.
top down, I'm going to be secure.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can almost be sure that you're insecure at that moment.
Yeah.
Like
Exactly. And a
it's
lot
not
of,
being felt.
yeah. Yeah, and I've done a lot of youth work and men's movement stuff back in the day. Not too much now, but there was kind of a lot of that fake it to, and there's truth to that. I'll give it. Act your way into a new way of thinking. I believe it. I do believe it. But there's a kind of like, this is how a secure person acts, and then you just try to imitate that. This is how
Mhm.
an attractive man acts. This is how a mentally healthy blah blah blah, and then you just try to pretend to be that person. Well, you're going to be a nervous wreck, because the mask is going to slip. I mean, you know that. you know and what do women like, what do men like? When they can see into the head of their partners and they know what they're thinking, that makes them very secure. That creates a secure relationship. you know the guy who says, honey, every single meal is fantastic,
Mhm.
that girl will not trust you, because that's not correct.
Mhm.
You don't want to say like, no, this is awful. You want to say something like, no, no, this is good, but I know what I love. I love your egg, man. The man
Mhm.
who is with the girl, and the girl, everything's always wonderful. Everything he does is perfect. He knows that can't be true. What's in her head? What's in her head? But she's scared. She's scared to reveal it, and he's scared to reveal
Mm.
it. You know.
Mm.
So it's the perfect relationship. Imagine like both people, you get to see inside their heads, and you know what the guy's thinking, because he's very honest, and you know what she's thinking. Can you say what you're thinking and the body feels secure? Oh, that's a great
Yeah.
relationship.
So
Yeah.
so I'm listening to this right now. I'm not me. Again, another as if person's listening, and they're saying, okay, what's one thing I can do right now? I can't get a therapist right now.
Yeah.
I what's the one thing I can do to start showing up to my life more honestly, more directly,
Yeah.
more in my body, like
Yeah.
right now,
Yeah.
because I'm
I
lost.
yeah. I truly believe this, and it, yeah, I'll tell you that I think for the most part the simplest things work the best. But don't believe me. Try yourself. If you did a 10-minute body scan every morning, 6 months from now, you'll be transformed, because a lot of the things I'm talking about have reasons, but they're because of disembodiment. You're in your head and you're not in your body. You're thinking, was it like this? Or, well, you know the answer. Your body knows it. Why are you in your head? Of course you're anxious. If you just did, and what does that look like? Very simple. Meditate posture, sit in a chair, whatever, feet on the floor, straight back. Hey, look at my forehead. What's it feeling? If it's tense, fine. You just know, oh, it's tense. Then my chin, jaw, neck, chest, all the way down to my feet. If you spend 10 minutes a day, your relationship will get better because you will know what you're feeling. And if you're in your body knows what you want. Your body knows what you're feeling. Your body knows what you need. And you just act from the body, out of your head, into the body. And it's wonderful for a lot of things, but for attachment especially. 10-minute body
Hmm.
scan works wonders.
Hmm. Yeah, it makes me think of the elephant and little bird metaphor you used for the unconscious and the conscious. And there's a way in which if the elephant is angry and trying to kind of buck around and flail, but the
Yeah.
bird's like, no, we're okay right now. I'm not mad.
Right.
You know, that kind of incongruence there, and with this
Yeah.
body scan's able to just feel into this. Whoa, there's a
Yeah.
raging elephant.
Yeah. And as you know, incongruence is a split, like you split yourself. Part of you is a knower. I know that I'm upset. And then part of you is the doer, but I'm acting like I'm not. Oh, so now you got a
Mm-hmm.
knower part of you, you got a doer part of you. You
Hmm.
just split yourself. You're less whole. The minute you lie,
Mm-hmm.
if you know you're lying, you just split yourself and you're pretending. And why can't you be present in that relationship now? Because when you're split, the presence is full of anxiety and you don't want to be there. That's why you're in your head and not your body. You're only in your body when you're whole because it's comfortable there. And now you can be present. And where's relationships? Right now, in the body, in the present.
Mm-hmm.
You can only be
Mm-hmm.
present if you're whole. Yeah.
Hmm. Jonathan, this has been a really fun conversation.
Yeah, brother. Enjoy it.
Wondering, yeah, I'm wondering if you could shed just maybe before we kind of wrap up, just like what does the journey of attachment healing, or maybe going from insecure to secure, what does that look like generally? If we could kind of map out the territory that someone might be going on if they decided to take this
Yeah.
adventure.
Well, yeah. I mean, what it is it's almost like, your relationship to the world is going to be like your relationship to other people. It's going to be like your relationship to yourself. It's basically learning to treat yourself well. I don't want to say you have to love yourself. It's about being curious about yourself in a loving way. Something like that. Something like that. And as you do it, you'll get more and more curious. Why? Because you can open up and share things, and it's going to feel safe to do so, just a little bit at a time. So you're going to learn so much more about yourself. And your relationships will be easy. Why? Because you'll be curious about them. If you're insecure, you don't want to know too much because maybe they feel this way about you. Maybe they're going to be you're going to be curious. And I tell you, you'll bring that right into the world. All of a sudden, the world will look very curious and interesting, and the world will open up because the world kind of reflects your inner self, uh, your
Mm-hmm.
attitude, and that journey will be that kind of opening up of
Mm-hmm.
interest, curiosity, and passion. You might even discover new talents, new passions, new creativities. That's the way it goes, believe it or not, just from doing attachment work.
Mm.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So before we end, is there any? So I kind of said before when we started where people can find you, but is there
Yeah.
any other thing that you've got going on right now
Uh,
that you want to direct people to?
yeah, well, attachmenthealinghelp.com, but I also have a YouTube channel. It's probably called Attachment Healing, but if you look me up, Jonathan McCormack, McCormack, and I do all this stuff. I just sit there and I talk about all this stuff from spirituality to relationships, a lot of attachment stuff. And I always give a meditation at the end of everything. So I always give a 10-minute meditation, which can be really useful. You can go to those YouTube videos and just check out the last 10 minutes for the meditation. And
Hmm.
yeah, so that's pretty much it.
And if people want, they can also work with you doing this work that we just talked about.
Oh
Is
yeah,
that
if
right?
anyone wants IPF or attachment, hit me up. And if I'm right now, probably everyone's on vacation, so I have openings right now. But oftentimes I do have a wait list. But I know a lot of people too. So if you let me know, if not me, yeah, I can put you on my wait list, or I can find someone. Because it's hard to find good attachment people. But I love helping people, so please hit me up. Yeah.
Hmm. Well, Jonathan, this has been really enjoyable for me and just like a pleasure to talk with you on such a broad spectrum of topics,
Yeah.
all of which I feel have threads we could be pulling on for many, many conversations. If that was something you're interested in, I certainly welcome you
Sure.
back on this
Oh, I'd
podcast
love it too.
anytime.
Anytime, brother. Yeah.